Hi, I am Rachel Larsson, a qualified naturopath, nutritionist, and holistic gut health expert. I want to talk to you today about how to nourish yourself on a plant-based diet, a question and a topic I know so many of us are talking about, as become more environmentally conscious and gut and health conscious as well. So how do we do it properly? So I want to talk to you about key nutrients that you would need to consider. What are the health benefits? What's happening to the gut if there's issues tolerating plant-based foods, and the mental health impacts of going plant-based. So I've got some awesome slides for you today, and I will get them up right now. Okay, so how to nourish yourself on a plant-based diet? That is the question. Okay. Cool. So what do we mean by plant-based? So there's so many variations of the word plant-based, and I think it's easy to say that you shouldn't get caught up on labels because there's so many variations, and what works for you doesn't work for someone else. But when we're talking about, I guess, the traditional senses, you've got semi-vegetarian, lacto-ovo, lacto, pescatarian, vegan, and then omnivore, which for many of us is where we sit right now, where we have a combination of like all of the plant-based foods, but obviously eat plants as well. I want to give you guys a really awesome freebie that's going to pull together all the information that we spoke about, or we're going to speak about today, in terms of how to eat a nutritionally rich, nourishing diet. So a free download will be available called How to Nourish Yourself on a Plant-Based Diet, and that's your practical guide to living a healthy veg-based diet or plant-based diet, whatever you feel is comfortable for your body. So first, I'm going to jump into some nutritional considerations that you have for a plant-based, and there are a couple, so I've picked some of the key ones. So number one is going to be protein. So it's something which you can absolutely get adequate amounts on a plant-based diet. It's just you need to be smart about it. So it's an abundant building block that we use in our musculoskeletal systems, our organs, and also in our skin and our blood. It's a source of nitrogen, and it's a source of amino acids, and amino acids are essentially the building blocks of life. So it's involved in like our neurotransmitter production and so many other functions in the body. It is essential. And there are different types of amino acids that you get: essential and non-essential. Essential is when it must be obtained and eaten in the diet. Non-essential is when your body can make it. And there is sometimes where some special conversions that can be made as well, where the body can make some essential amino acids under very special circumstances. So the issue when we come to plant-based is that there's an incomplete and complete kind of aspect to protein. So complete, meaning a complete protein would be that all of the essential amino acids are there, and they tend to be found in animal-based. Incomplete is when you've got one or more of the essential amino acids in a too little amount, and this tends to be our plant-based protein sources. There also is a conversion in terms of digestibility, where we have a better and higher digestibility of getting those amino acids in from animal-based versus plant-based. So we need to make sure that we are conscious that there is actually a digestibility issue. In the handout or the download, it will talk about what your plant-based adequate protein needs are. So the how-tos are coming up. Iron, we know that it's one of the ones that we're probably a bit more aware of that can be an issue. Really important for blood health, oxygen transporting in your enzymes, but we have a lot in storage for those just in case times. The difference between plant-based and animal-based is heme being animal-based and non-heme being plant-based. There's difference in structures, there's difference in bioavailability, so how it's utilized and absorbed in the body. So it's important to know that whilst you're getting iron from a plant-based source, it is slightly different to animal-based. So how do you eat enough? Iron tends to be a bit lower on a plant-based on the whole. However, complete anemia tends to be rare, only because you can actually get it from your plant-based foods. There is The caveat to that is that there is a higher requirement of iron to compensate for those issues. So having about 1.8 times higher the recommended daily intake of iron if you compare to your omnivores or meat eaters or animal eaters. So again, the download will have all of this spelled out nice and clear for you. B12 is something which is incredibly important, especially if you are a strict vegan. It's got huge roles in the nervous system, bone health, energy production, how your DNA works. It is predominantly from animal based. From plant sources, you would only get it if it's like contaminated by manure, which is a plant, I guess, byproduct, or plant waste, or sorry, animal waste, or if it's fortified in food. Gut bacteria do not make this. Well, I should say they do make it, but we don't absorb it. So even though, yeah, there might be some talk about how your gut can make B vitamins, this is true, absolutely, but our body will not absorb the B12, which is cruelly ironic. So the realities of being a B12, or the realities of B12 and being a veggie or plant-based eater, is that it can take years for a deficiency to occur. So just be mindful that it might be a bit of a slow issue that you need to monitor. If you do not eat any animal products at all, if you do not supplement, or if you do not eat fortified food, you will eventually develop a B12 deficiency, because plant-based sources, which is essentially, as I said, if it's contaminated by manure or if it's fortified in itself, they're going to be your only sources of that. So supplementation is something which you really need to consider for B12 specifically. Some of the symptoms would be like types of anemia, neurological disorders, so tingling and numbness in hands and feet are very, very key symptoms. And as I was mentioning before, very restrictive diets is a cause of the B12 deficiency, or say animal restrictive diets, or even if you're plant-based or not, if you've got gut issues like intrinsic factor issues, gastric acid, or other enzymes that are rendering B12 absorption a problem, then you can develop a deficiency. So gut health is huge when it comes to B12. But dare I say, all nutrients need a good gut for them to be absorbed. Medications can also interact with B12, and you might be someone that has an increased need for a particular reason. Calcium, important in your blood health, lots of your thyroids, obviously bone and teeth, which we think about, but actually our blood health and the electrolyte level is a very, very crucial, actually like life dependent kind of function that calcium has. Also muscle and nerve function as well. So many things beyond the bones and the teeth. There can be an issue in terms of like the acidity sources of calcium. What is, I guess, understood is that too much or an excess in protein is an issue for calcium absorption. However, a lot of the sources of protein that we have, they've got other nutrients in them like phosphorus and potassium that help buffer any issues there. So it's not really an issue if you're wondering about acidity and calcium. It's just if you were to go completely excessive on a really strict refined protein like diet, or if you were just to be having protein shakes, breakfast, lunch and dinner, that would pose a problem. There's another issue potentially with oxalates, where it's basically another kind of chemical that's found in food naturally occurring, and this can bind to calcium and make it really hard for the body to access. So foods like beetroot, spinach and rhubarb, they can actually impact calcium absorption. But that's just a little side note and something to wonder, because obviously being a veggie or having a lot more plant-based, you might be leaning on these foods a bit more. Zinc. I love it. My favorite nutrient, as nerdy as that is. It's involved in 300 enzyme reactions in the body, which is a lot. So if you have a zinc deficiency, you could be affected in many, many ways. It's also involved in immune health, skin health, gut, neurotransmitters. So think about happy and calm, chemicals that we make. Also reproductive health in terms of sperm and egg. The problem is that it's not in the soil as it used to be. So whether you are vegetarian or non-vegetarian, it is challenging to get adequate amounts. So I guess begs the question, are we all kind of at risk of deficiency? Does zinc actually matter from a plant-based or animal-based perspective? Potentially not, and that I think we're all at risk. But yeah, phytic acid is something that can be found in foods, particularly your legumes, nuts and seeds, that can make zinc absorption a problem, and we need to, I guess, compensate for that in some ways. And the download explains how you can do that. You can also test for zinc as well if you're wanting to monitor that, and if it's you're kind of presenting with a few of those symptoms that you think maybe there's a zinc deficiency there. And that also helps you supplement a bit better. But in terms of being a plant-based diet, you kind of need 50% more zinc than the recommended daily intake as a veggie, especially if you're having lots of legumes, nuts, and seeds, and there's a high phytate kind of ratio there. So I guess there's a few considerations which are explained in the download, how to overcome that and how to optimize your nutrient intake. Omega-3 or essential fatty acids are so important for cell health, skin health, inflammation, your central nervous system, a whole bunch of things. We know that there's saturated and unsaturated, so saturated being bad, unsaturated being good. And as a part of the unsaturated, you've got your omega-3, 6, and 9. However, we don't want there to be an excess of omega-3 to 6 in terms of ratio. We ideally want to have a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every gram of omega-6, we want a gram of omega-3. At the moment, we've got far too much omega-3 far too much omega-6 compared to omega-3. So we've got like 20 grams of omega-6 compared to 1 gram of omega-3. And that is a huge issue in that a high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 can promote cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, autoimmune disease, and inflammatory disorders. But conversely, a lower ratio where you've got that higher omega-3 ratio has been known to reduce the issue of many chronic health diseases. So essentially, we want to bump up that omega-3 to help balance out that omega-6, which is found so often in plant-based foods, omega-6. So this is a really key issue we need to be talking about. So I guess to explain that a bit more, you've got in terms of omega-3, you've got different categories as well. You've got alpha linoleic acid, which can only be received from your diet, and the sources are linseeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, all of those things. You've got your non-essential form, which is EPA and DHA. Your body can make EPA and DHA from alpha linoleic acid, or ALA. So many abbreviations, right? But this conversion of ALA to these EPA and DHAs isn't that efficient. Direct sources of EPA and DHA are your fish, different egg yolks, depending if they're fortified. Algae is another thing. So plant-based, there's a few in that there's algae, but definitely animal-based is more your direct sources of your omega-3 in your EPA and DHA form. So when we're talking about ALA, which is again can be converted into EPA and DHA, the intake is similar for veggies and non-veggies, but the conversion into DHA and EPA is quite poor. So you do need to eat a lot of your alpha linoleic acid sources, which is your linseeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, and chia seeds, and all of those things to actually get a really, I guess, therapeutic conversion in the body. So key nutrients, we had protein, calcium, iron, B12, omegas, zinc. There's 6 of the key ones, but each person will have their individual issues, but they're ones which we know that as a plant-based eater, there may be particularly increased concerns around them. So do we need to supplement or not? Like, do we really need them? So you have to consider supplementing if there's medications involved that are drawing on different nutrients. So the oral contraceptive pill and B vitamins is a known, relationship. So if you're on the oral contraceptive pill, potentially looking at a B vitamin is something in your best interest. If you're stressed, our body chews up so many of these nutrients. If you have digestive issues, so low stomach acid, bacterial imbalances, IBS, irritable bowel disease, gallbladder issues, any and all of these can compromise how your body breaks down and absorbs food, and we really need to address that. Otherwise, you're eating and taking all these things and there may not be no payoff. If you've had any weight loss procedures, or if you can't eat the recommended daily intake of these foods, you might need to consider supplementing. Also, heavy periods, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, if you're doing lots of exercise, if you have a condition that requires key nutrients, or if you are 100% vegan plant-based, you must consider B12. As I mentioned, you cannot get it from plant-based sources in the amounts for you to have an adequate amount. So that is one thing, or if you're a vegan, supplementing B12 should almost be a no-brainer. But always test to monitor. Which brings us to testing. So there are different tests, blood tests. There is a difference between normal and optimal. So you might be, for example, zinc, a reference range of like 8 to 18. If you're at the level 9, yes, you're normal. Is it optimal for you? Potentially not. You might sit better a bit higher. So there may be an optimal range within that for you. You can do bone density scans to assess calcium and bone health, and go off symptoms like fatigue and easy bruising for B12, or zinc. You could have poor wound healing, or may actually have anxiety, depression. That might be a symptom of a low zinc issue. Functional testing is where we look into the function of the body versus, I guess, trying to detect disease or abnormality. So this is where we can look at for stool testing, like bacteria, inflammatory markers, and enzymes. Breath tests, we can look at malabsorption of food, so fructose malabsorption, lactose malabsorption, as SIBO. We can look at food allergies and intolerances if that's playing a part, and urine, we can look at things like leaky gut, which can definitely affect how your body utilizes nutrients. So lots of options. Choosing the right supplement. So this is where it gets a bit tricky. Not all supplements are made the same. Are they a form that's of a great bioavailability, or they're a really poor form that you're essentially, the saying like expensive urine, like, is it a case of that? Is the dosing therapeutic? So multivitamins, for example, they're a bit of like, jack of all trades, master of none. So you may not actually get enough for that therapeutic dose, but you do get a little bit to kind of prop up your levels a bit. Holistic assessment should be considered because there's cautions and contraindications in the nutrients with any medications or conditions that you may be having. Ingestion versus absorption. So what you're eating isn't actually getting absorbed. So is there leaky gut? Is there SIBO? Is there IBS that we need to be addressing to help you, max out your nutritional intake? And are you choosing products that are of quality? So buying on the dark web, or even just the web at the moment, there's so many options out there, but are they actually what they say they are? So make sure you go with TGA, or the Therapeutic Goods Administration approved, which is an Australian certification of that. When to take it, with or without food. Some minerals compete. Supplements can still be dangerous, so too much of a good thing is not good. And you can also sometimes run into side effects like iron and constipation, which different forms will be better for constipation than others. And also, as we age and your circumstances change, there's considerations there. So how does a plant-based diet affect your health? So there's so many gut health benefits from eating more plant foods. Diversity is associated with a better, more resilient gut. Plant-based foods are a source of prebiotics and fiber, which supports so many beneficial bacteria in the gut, such as Roseburia, Erectale, and it also helps the production of short-chain fatty acids, which are these, our life depends on them. It's the fuel for the gut. They're anti-inflammatory. There is just so many benefits and, reasons why we need these short chain fatty acids, which, are supported in its production when we have more fiber and things. And also polyphenols, which are found in like berries and green tea and stuff, anti-inflammatory, and many other antioxidant profiles. Also, eating more plant-based, it supports the microbiome to help with depression and anxiety. It's also been helpful in terms of cardiovascular and metabolic issues like diabetes, blood sugar regulation, even just weight gain and weight status. It can be beneficial from a plant-based perspective. So eating more plants is better in that way. But what to do if your legumes and pulses are hard to digest? This is like the questions, like I want to eat more plant-based, but it's a farty party and it's not fun for anybody, including yourself. So the symptoms that your gut would need help is you're bloated. Obviously, that's super uncomfortable if there's farting and burping and I guess unreasonable amounts. bowel motions are a bit all over the place. You've got food intolerances that are either known or unknown. If there's any abdominal pain or cramping, so often this comes back when you go see a practitioner that it's normal, all tests are normal, and then you've just been left with the label of IBS, which can be really kind of like, okay, well, now what do I do? And more often than not, unfortunately, at least in my practice, I've seen patients left a bit high and dry in terms of their options as to how to manage it effectively. So I guess that begs the question, what else could be happening? There could be, in addition to IBS, or maybe instead of IBS, and it just hasn't been picked up, low stomach acids, digestive enzyme issues, bacterial imbalances. The number one cause of bloating and food intolerance that I see in my clinic is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is a bacterial overgrowth of the small intestine. So you're probably thinking, do you not want more bacteria? Isn't more better? And if you look at these numbers here, so in your large intestine, you want like trillions of bacteria. In your small intestine, you only want to have like 10,000, 100,000, type, maybe even a million, but that's, 10,000, 100,000, that would be what you want at the most. Any more than that, and that starts to disrupt with the functions in the small intestine, which is nutritional absorption. So when you have, what's going on in terms of the IBS and SIBO, and if it's not IBS, why haven't I been told it's SIBO? And so it's interesting in that up to 78% of patients with the IBS and 40% of non-IBS patients, so no one with IBS, have SIBO. When you have SIBO, the bacteria in the overgrowth amount create gas because they ferment your food, and this gas is problematic because it causes symptom of IBS and it damages your intestinal wall. When we can test for SIBO, which is, it kind of takes out the guessing game, which is so important when it comes to treating the gut, because so often we're leading blind and we don't exactly have a zipper. We can kind of unzip ourselves and see what's going on. A breath test is gold standard. It is different to a fructose and lactose test. So if you've had those and you've said, oh, well, I didn't have fructose or lactose intolerance, they are a different test. This is not picked up on stool tests, colonoscopies, gastroscopies, or any endoscopy, which is why it may also be that all tests have come back normal. It's because it's sitting in a section of the gut which is a bit harder to reach. So the breath test is how you assess this. You treat, or you can treat effectively, and it requires a very specific combination of herbs, probiotics, prebiotics. These do need to be carried out with a practitioner because they're quite complex, and you can put yourself and your microbiome at risk when used in the incorrect way. Diet only provides symptom relief only. And this is very difficult as a plant-based eater because a lot of the diet kind of symptom relief would be putting you on would be a low FODMAP diet as an example. And FODMAP foods are things like legumes, chickpeas, apples, onion, garlic, all of these high fibrous plant-based foods are actually aggravating in this circumstance. So it's very important you need a practitioner to support you through that, because you can be left thinking, well, what on earth am I supposed to eat? If you do go on a symptom relief diet, it's a transient thing. It's not a long-term treatment, and long-term restriction is not a treatment. All you've done is taken out the trigger. You haven't supported and changed the gut that's reacting to food. So it's very important to know that difference. So SIBO symptoms is things like bloating and wind, like the number one symptom, food sensitivities, allergies, and intolerances. You can have chronic iron and B12 deficiencies, which also, doubles your risk if you're a vegan or veggie. Changing of bowel motions, reflux, joint pain, aches in the stomach, also things like asthma you can get as well. So I want to, drive home the message of it's your body's response to food rather than the food itself that is the issue. So as I said, if you have a gut issue and you find taking out these high fibrous plant-based foods make your stomach makes your stomach feel better, what you have done is remove the trigger. You have not changed the gut environment, and therefore when you put the food back in there, there will be no change. So what we need to do is address the gut's environment and the gut's behavior and its function to then allow a better and different response to food, so you can tolerate these high fiber foods, and so you can go on living as a healthy plant-based eater, or an increased plant-based eater if you're not wanting to go veg or vegan in full. So it's a lot to think about. Should I or should I not go plant-based? And so how do you look after your mood during this time of transition? So food is more than a source of nutrients. So it's our social and emotional, like we've got big connections with those. So we need to think about how that plays in our life. If, for example, you choose to eat completely vegetarian at home, but when you're out and about with friends, you're going to allow yourself to kind of eat as an omnivore and have a few animal-based products. If that is better for your mental health, then that sounds like the right diet for you. Don't get caught up on labeling your diet. Call yourself a conscious flexitarian if you choose to have a label, or you just maybe that the ratio of plant-based foods is higher in your diet, but you still don't feel the need to call it anything in particular. Totally fine. There's no need for it. There's a learning curve. So small and manageable changes are great. Maybe start off with 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 meals that are more plant-based, and then increase if that's what you feel like doing. And always eat to your unique body needs. So, dependent on your genetic makeup, how much you exercise, health conditions, any medications involved, your needs are very different to mine. So we need to eat accordingly. But you can also save that transitional kind of all those questions and all that uncertainty, save all that, team up with a professional to help you through that, especially if there is issues tolerating these fiber-rich foods. It will be incredibly difficult to be a plant-based eater if you cannot tolerate legumes, chickpeas, nuts, seeds, all the high fiber foods that make up a plant-based diet. So if there's gut issues involved, please reach out, or you could be eating yourself into a bit more of a dire and a bit more of a circumstance. So with restriction, it tends to be a snowball effect, and the more you restrict, the more your body kind of takes issue to that food. So don't want that snowball effect happening. Reach out. There is answers. There is a solution. It may be SIBO that we've spoken about here. If it's not SIBO, there is always something else going on that can be explored and identified. You may also want to look out for or reach out for some help if you don't know where to begin. So how do you even eat like a veggie? How do you cook legumes? If you're experiencing any symptom or to anything that we've mentioned, or if there's any issues with supplements or you're not sure what supplement to take, so getting supplemental advice, highly recommended. And you need assistance in creating a healthy plant-based balanced diet. So I work with my patients on the Gut Feeling to Healing program. It's the personalized program to help you love your guts. Again, that's the goal. It's one-on-one consultations, practitioner-only products, holistic dietary and lifestyle advice, and lots of resources and support. Functional testing is available, and we choose the right one for your health. Nutritional biochemistry, so we make sure, like we were talking about, is zinc and B12 associated with mood? Yes. Do you have enough of these to assist mood neurotransmitters? So do you have a zinc deficiency that's inhibiting you from making serotonin? If so, let's prop up those zinc levels. Emotional well-being support, so the mind-gut connection and how your gut responds to your mood is really important, so we want to make sure that's been looked after as well. And also additional research time is allocated for research and analysis of your case and of any of the tests that we undertake to make sure we optimize our time together. So with that, I wanted to just remind you that there is such an amazing resource available for you to download. So how to nourish yourself on a plant-based diet. It'll be free for you to kind of have a look, and it's got lots of great tips in it. I am Rachel Larsson, and I've had such a great time sharing with you some information about how to eat a healthy plant-based diet, what's going on with the gut, and how you can help your gut live the healthiest life so then you can be the healthiest version of yourself. And I'm so glad that I've been able to share all of that with you, and I can't wait to see you around.